There's a strange paradox sitting underneath most of your suffering, and it is this: the less you care, the more life seems to move in your favor. Not because the universe rewards indifference, but because caring, the way most people practice it, is really just gripping wearing a nicer name. The moment you loosen that grip, something in you stops fighting the current, and the current starts working for you instead of against you. Here's what nobody tells you about caring too much. It isn't devotion. It's fear wearing a disguise. You tell yourself you care about the outcome because you're responsible, because you're driven, because you want good things. But underneath it, most of the time, is a quiet terror that if you don't hold on tightly enough, everything slips away. And that terror doesn't protect the thing you're gripping. It repels it. Think about the last time you were desperate for someone to like you. You over-explained. You second-guessed every word. You became someone smaller and more anxious than you actually are. And the harder you tried, the more distance you created. Now think about the version of you that shows up without needing anything from the room. Relaxed, unbothered, simply present. That version is the one people are drawn to every time, and it has nothing to do with trying harder. It has everything to do with caring less. Carl Jung, a psychologist who spent much of his life studying what actually drives human behavior beneath the surface, believed that most of what we call caring is really unconscious material asking to be managed. The anxious gripping, the obsessive checking, the need for a specific outcome. He saw these less as love and more as fear that hasn't been looked at directly. What you haven't made conscious, he taught, doesn't disappear. It runs your life from underneath, disguised as concern, disguised as responsibility, disguised as care. And that's the part most people never examine, because caring feels virtuous. Nobody wants to admit that their exhausting, white-knuckled grip on a relationship or a goal or an image of themselves is actually just fear in a better outfit. Here's the truth. Caring, in its rawest form, is a kind of story you keep telling yourself about how things have to go. If this doesn't work out, I'll have failed. If they don't respond, it means I'm not enough. If I don't control this, everything falls apart. None of that is peace. That's a nervous system running a script it never agreed to question. And the moment you stop feeding that script, even for a few minutes, you notice something. The world didn't collapse. It kept moving, quietly, without your hand on every lever. That's the first crack in the illusion, and once you see it, you can't fully unsee it again. Think about your own body for a second. Have you ever tried to force yourself to sleep? The harder you try, the more awake you become. Have you ever tried to appear confident in a room? The more you perform it, the more the anxiety leaks through anyway. This is the same law playing out everywhere in your life, not just at night, not just in a room full of strangers. The harder you grip something, the more it resists you, and the more it resists you, the tighter you grip, and that loop is where most people spend their entire lives, mistaking the tightness for effort and the exhaustion for proof that they're doing something right. Stop caring the way fear taught you to care, and something strange happens. You start caring the way peace teaches you to care instead. You still show up. You still do the work. You still love the people you love. But you stop needing it to look a certain way by a certain date in order to feel safe. That shift, small as it sounds, changes everything about how life responds to you. Because life was never actually resisting your effort. It was resisting your fear. Jung spoke often about the difference between the persona, the mask we build to be seen as acceptable, and the deeper self underneath it that doesn't need managing at all. Most people spend their whole lives polishing the mask, caring desperately about how it's perceived, terrified of what happens if it slips. But the more you obsess over the mask, the more brittle it becomes, and the people around you can feel that brittleness even when they can't name it. The moment you stop clutching the mask so tightly, you stop broadcasting fear, and you start broadcasting something people are actually drawn toward. Not perfection, ease. You stop caring what the room thinks, and your voice steadies. You stop caring whether the outcome arrives on your timeline, and your decisions get clearer. You stop caring about controlling every variable, and you finally have energy left over for the variables that were always yours to work with. This is not numbness. This is not apathy dressed up as growth. This is the difference between a person governed by their own unprocessed fear and a person who has looked at that fear honestly enough that it no longer needs to run the show. Now, take this into money, because almost nobody applies this principle where they need it most. Watch how differently people behave around money, depending on whether they're gripping it or trusting it. The person who checks their account 5 times a day, who feels a jolt of panic every time a bill arrives, who makes decisions purely to avoid the feeling of not having enough, that person is not being responsible. They are running the exact same fear script, just wearing a spreadsheet instead of a relationship. And the strange thing about money is that it behaves almost exactly like the river you can't catch with your fist. Grip it out of scarcity, make every decision from panic, and you tend to make worse decisions, not better ones. You take the job that drains you because you're afraid to wait. You say yes to the client who disrespects your time because saying no feels too risky. You underprice yourself because some version of you is convinced you have to grab whatever's offered before it disappears. None of that is strategy. That's fear, dressed up as financial discipline, and it rarely produces the safety it's chasing. Loosen the grip, not recklessly, not by ignoring your responsibilities, but by removing the panic underneath the decisions. And something shifts. You negotiate from a steadier place. You wait for the right opportunity instead of grabbing the nearest one. You stop making decisions designed to soothe your nervous system and start making decisions designed to build your actual life, and those are almost never the same decisions. Take it into your health. How many people have you known, maybe you are one of them, who became so obsessed with optimizing their body that the obsession itself became the stressor, tracking every meal down to the gram, weighing themselves multiple times a day, treating a single indulgence like a moral failure? That is not care. That is fear wearing a nutrition label. The body, like everything else, does not respond well to being gripped. Cortisol floods a system that is constantly being monitored and judged, and paradoxically, the people most anxious about their health often carry more of its physical costs than the people who simply live with reasonable, relaxed attention. Care about your body, yes. Feed it well, move it, rest it. But the moment caring turns into surveillance, into a battle against yourself, you've crossed out of care and into control. And control was never sustainable for anyone, in any domain, for very long. Take it into your work. There is a version of ambition that looks like ferocious commitment, but is actually just anxiety in a blazer. The person who cannot stop checking their email at midnight. The person who cannot enjoy a single win because they're already terrified about the next quarter. The person whose entire identity is a single job title, so that any setback at work feels like an existential threat rather than an ordinary Tuesday. That person is not more committed than everyone else. They are simply more afraid. And the fear is doing the work that a calmer form of ambition could do far more efficiently, without the burnout, without the sleepless nights, without the quiet resentment that eventually poisons even the things they were supposedly working so hard to protect. Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious in us does not go away, it comes back dressed as fate. Meaning the anxious grip you carry into your career, if you never examine where it actually comes from, doesn't just affect your career. It leaks into how you show up for your children, how you show up in your marriage, how you show up for yourself in the quiet 10 minutes before you fall asleep at night. The unprocessed fear does not stay in its lane. It runs everything, quietly, until you finally turn and look directly at it. And here's where it gets even more interesting, because this pattern shows up nowhere as clearly as it does in relationships. Think about the friend who calls constantly, who needs constant reassurance that everything is fine, who reads every delayed text as a sign of abandonment. That friend is exhausting to be around, not because they care too much about the friendship, but because their nervous system has confused connection with survival. Contrast that with the friend who trusts the relationship enough to give it room to breathe, who doesn't need daily proof that they still matter, who can go a week without talking and pick right back up exactly where you left off. Which of those two relationships actually feels more secure to you? Which one do you find yourself wanting to be around more? The paradox holds again. The friend who cares the least anxiously is usually the friend who is loved the most easily, because their presence doesn't come with a hidden invoice attached. The same thing is true in romantic relationships, maybe more visibly than anywhere else. Desperation has a scent, and people can smell it even when they can't name what they're smelling. The person who needs the relationship to work in order to feel like they're worth something will unconsciously sabotage the very thing they're trying to protect, because every interaction becomes a test, every silence becomes a threat, every ordinary disagreement becomes proof that the whole thing is collapsing. Compare that to a person who is genuinely at peace with themselves, who would like the relationship to work but does not need it to in order to feel whole. That person brings a completely different energy into every interaction, not because they care less about the person in front of them, but because they've stopped outsourcing their sense of safety to someone else's behavior. And ironically, that is exactly the energy most people find themselves wanting to stay close to. There's a reason for this, and it isn't mystical. When you are gripping an outcome, whether it's a relationship, a promotion, a specific version of how your life is supposed to look, your nervous system stays activated. Activated nervous systems are exhausting to be around because people can feel the tension even when you're smiling, even when you're saying all the right things. But when you release the grip, not the caring, the grip, your whole physiology changes. You breathe differently. You listen differently. You stop rehearsing your next sentence while the other person is still talking, because you're no longer performing for an outcome, you're actually present for a person. That presence is rare, and rare things are magnetic, not because they're trying to be, but because most people are starving for a version of connection that doesn't come with strings attached. Look at parenting too, because the paradox shows up here in a way that quietly breaks a lot of people's hearts before they understand what's happening. The parent who cares anxiously hovers over every decision, corrects every small mistake, needs the child to perform a certain way in order to feel like they're doing it right. That anxiety doesn't stay invisible. Children absorb it the way skin absorbs heat, long before they have language for what they're absorbing. They grow up scanning a parent's face for approval, instead of learning to trust their own instincts. And the very love that was meant to protect them ends up teaching them that safety depends on getting it right for someone else. The parent who has done the quieter work, who has looked at their own fear honestly enough that it doesn't need to be managed by their child's behavior, gives something far rarer: room. The child grows up trusting their own judgment because nobody was gripping every outcome on their behalf. This is not permissiveness. It is the same distinction running through every domain in this conversation, the difference between love and the fear that dresses itself up as love when nobody has looked closely enough to tell them apart. This extends into how you handle failure too, and this might be the place where the paradox saves you the most pain. The person who cares in the anxious sense treats every setback as a referendum on their worth. A rejected pitch means they're not good enough. A failed relationship means they're unlovable. A financial setback means they're destined to struggle forever. None of these conclusions are actually true, but the anxious mind reaches for them instantly because certainty, even miserable certainty, feels safer than the discomfort of not knowing. The person who has learned to care differently treats the exact same setback as information rather than verdict. The pitch didn't land, so what does that tell me about the offer, the timing, the audience? The relationship ended, so what does that reveal about what I actually need next time? The setback happened, so what adjustment does it call for? Same event, two completely different inner experiences, and only one of them leaves you able to actually learn anything. Jung had a phrase for the parts of yourself you refuse to look at directly. He called it the shadow, and he warned that whatever you don't face consciously, you end up projecting outward onto the world instead. This matters here because so much of the anxious gripping people mistake for caring is really unexamined shadow material. The fear of not being enough, inherited from somewhere long before you understood what was happening to you, gets projected onto your job, your relationship, your bank account, wherever it can find a place to attach itself. You think you're worried about the outcome. you're actually still fighting an old, unspoken fear that was never really about the outcome at all. And that's precisely why gripping harder never resolves it. You cannot solve an internal wound by controlling an external circumstance. The wound doesn't live out there. It lives in you, and no amount of managing the world around you will ever reach it. There's also a version of this that shows up in how people treat their own creativity, and it's worth sitting with because it's one of the clearest, quietest casualties of anxious caring. The person desperate for a piece of work to be good, to be praised, to prove something about their talent, almost always produces something stiffer and smaller than what they were capable of, because half their attention is locked on the outcome instead of the work in front of them. Watch what happens when that same person creates something with no audience in mind at all, no stakes attached, nothing to prove. It tends to be looser, truer, often better, precisely because nothing was being gripped. This is not a coincidence, and it's not limited to art. It's the same law showing up again, in a different room. Attention that is free of fear moves differently than attention that is trying to defend itself. And everything you make, everything you build, everything you say carries the fingerprint of which kind of attention produced it. So what does it actually look like to care differently, without becoming someone who doesn't care at all? Because that is the fear underneath this entire conversation. That letting go of the grip means becoming careless, becoming someone who doesn't try, someone who lets life happen to them instead of participating in it. That is not what this is. Caring differently means you still set the goal, you still send the message, you still show up to the interview, you still do the work with full attention and full effort. What changes is what happens after. You stop needing the response to arrive in a specific window in order to feel okay. You stop needing the outcome to look a certain way in order to feel like you did enough. You stop rehearsing catastrophe in your mind as a form of preparation, because you finally notice that the rehearsal never actually prepared you for anything. It only ever exhausted you in advance. There is a kind of quiet confidence that starts to build once you practice this, even in small doses. You send the email, and you don't check for a reply every 4 minutes. You have the difficult conversation, and you don't replay every word of it for the rest of the night. You apply for the opportunity, and you go on with your day, instead of holding your breath until you hear back. Each of these small moments is a rep, the same way lifting a weight is a rep, and over time they build something in you that anxious gripping could never build, an actual, structural sense of your own steadiness, independent of what any particular outcome decides to do. And here is the part that tends to surprise people the most. Once you stop caring in the anxious, gripping sense, you don't become someone who cares less about their life. You become someone who finally has room to care about the right things. You stop wasting your attention rehearsing disasters that never arrive. You stop spending your evenings replaying a conversation that ended hours ago. You stop needing every person in every room to understand you. And in that space, something quieter and much more durable starts to grow. The sense that you are already whole, with or without the specific outcome you were gripping so hard to force. Jung believed that a great deal of what we suffer from is not the situation itself, but our resistance to what already is. The unlived life, he taught, the parts of yourself pushed into the shadow because they were inconvenient or frightening, don't vanish just because you refuse to look at them. They come out sideways, as the very anxiety you mistake for caring, which means the way out was never more effort. It was honesty, looking directly at what you're actually afraid of losing and asking whether the fear was ever protecting you or whether it was simply running the same old pattern on repeat. This is worth sitting with, because most people spend years trying to fix the outer symptom without ever touching the inner cause. They change jobs to escape the anxiety, only to bring the same anxious grip into the new one. They end one relationship to escape the tension, only to recreate the identical dynamic with someone new. The common denominator in every one of these repeating patterns is never really the job, or the person, or the circumstance. It's the unexamined fear traveling with you from room to room, wearing a different costume each time, but never actually leaving. Individuation, in Jung's language, the lifelong process of becoming who you actually are underneath the fear and the performance. begins the moment you stop blaming the room and start looking at what you keep bringing into every room you enter. There is a quieter kind of caring underneath all of this, one most people never get taught because nobody modeled it for them growing up. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't perform concern to prove it exists. It looks, from the outside, almost like calm, and it's often mistaken for not caring at all, right up until you notice that the people who have it tend to build the steadiest relationships, the most sustainable careers, the calmest homes, not because they wanted less, but because they stopped needing the wanting to be loud in order to be real. This is the caring that survives disappointment without collapsing. It is the caring that can watch a plan fall apart and immediately start looking for the next honest step instead of spiraling into what this says about them as a person. It is not colder than anxious caring. It is warmer because it has room in it for things not to go the way you hoped, without that becoming evidence that you are somehow broken or behind. So try it, even briefly. The next time you catch yourself gripping a relationship, an outcome, an image of who you're supposed to be, pause and ask a different question. Not how do I make this happen, just what happens if I stop needing it to happen a certain way. You may notice your shoulders drop before you notice anything else change. You may notice you're breathing for the first time in hours. And slowly, without forcing it, without announcing it to anyone, you'll notice the people, the opportunities, the calm you were chasing start finding their way back to you. Not because you worked harder to deserve them, but because you finally stopped standing in your own way. Watch what happens over the following weeks if you actually practice this, instead of just agreeing with it in the moment. You'll notice conversations that used to drain you start feeling lighter, because you're no longer managing them for a specific outcome, you're simply having them. You'll notice decisions that used to keep you up at night start resolving themselves faster, because you're no longer running every option through a filter of fear before you're allowed to choose. You'll notice that the people who were only ever drawn to your anxious performance start to fall away, and the people who are actually drawn to you, the steadier, more honest version underneath all that gripping, start to come closer. That's not a coincidence, and it's not luck. That's what happens when your outside finally matches your inside, instead of working overtime to disguise it. None of this happens instantly, and it's worth saying plainly so you don't mistake a single, hard week for proof that it isn't working. Old patterns don't dissolve because you understood them once. They loosen slowly, the same way a muscle you've clenched for years takes time to remember what relaxed even feels like. There will be days the old grip comes back, an email you check too many times, a conversation you replay against your better judgment, an outcome you catch yourself needing far too badly. That is not failure. That is simply the pattern being older than the awareness you're bringing to it now, and every time you notice it and loosen anyway, the pattern gets a little quieter, a little less automatic, until one day you realize weeks have gone by and you haven't needed to fight it at all. That's the whole secret, hiding inside the paradox. You were never actually failing by caring too much. You were just caring in a direction that could never bring you peace. Care less about the outcome, and you free up everything you need to finally show up for the life that's actually in front of you. Not the one you were rehearsing in your head at 3 a.m. Not the one you were gripping so tightly your knuckles went white. The one that was quietly waiting for you the entire time. Right here. The moment you finally stopped fighting to force it into shape and let it simply arrive.